Hello quiet ones, welcome back. I missed you too. I hope you remember to click that thumbs up button and the subscribe as well. Plus I hope you enjoyed today's video. Today's story is called I Found a Dark and Lonely Road by Shadow Swimmer 77, and I will be linking the story in the description as well. Without any further ado, let's get into it. I try to live my life without too many regrets. I've had highs and lows like everyone else, sure, but I do what I can not to worry too much about what could have happened if I'd made a different choice. If I maybe hadn't taken the road less traveled, I figure everyone makes the best decisions they can with the information they have available to them at the time. Going through all the what ifs is ridiculous because the only way you would have made a different choice is if you'd had some other detail, which of course you didn't. Hindsight is perfect, and even then, you can never be sure exactly what the sequence of events might have looked like if you'd gone right instead of left, and yet there is one choice I made, one road I took, that I just can't help but wonder how things might have turned out if I'd only done something different. My job has me move around pretty regularly. I'm not going to get into what I do, that has no bearing on the story, but a couple years ago I was working in Philadelphia and living on the other side of the Delaware River in Cherry Hill, New Jersey. I'm originally from northwestern Pennsylvania, and since this was the closest I'd been to home since I moved out to college, I took the chance to go see my parents whenever I could. I knew I'd be moving again before long, and my folks aren't getting any younger, so I tried to find a weekend every month or so to make the 7-hour trip a visit to them. If I'd been thinking about it when I was looking for places to rent, I'd have probably tried to live on the west side of Philadelphia instead of in Jersey to avoid the traffic during rush hour. But by the time I realized it, the lease was signed and there wasn't much I could do. The drive to my hometown was pretty boring, honestly. I'd take the Ben Franklin Bridge across the river, head up I-476 for an hour or so, then a long slug across basically the entire expanse of PA on I-80 before another hour on I-79 to Erie, Pennsylvania, where I'm from. The only variance in the drive was how long it would take me to get through Philly, because once I got on the 476 extension, I could typically predict my ETA within 5 or 10 minutes. My second summer in Jersey, I'd taken 2 weeks off and planned on spending the second week in Erie. Things changed that first Wednesday though, because a big storm blew through and knocked out power in a good part of the area of where I was living. Dealing with 90-degree heat with no air conditioning wasn't something I particularly felt like spending the first half of my vacation doing. So after one uncomfortably sweaty night, I let my parents know I'd be heading over a few days early. In retrospect, I should have left first thing in the morning, but because I had a couple things to take care of before heading out, by the time I finally got on the road that Thursday, it was past lunchtime and getting on toward mid-afternoon. For whatever reason, the traffic in Philly was particularly heavy, and by the time I finally got through town, I was a good hour behind schedule. Still, based on my normal timeline, I figured I'd still be able to make it in early enough to grab a dinner and beer with my dad and brother before cashing in for the night. Two things I hadn't taken into consideration were the number of folks that apparently had the same idea to get out of town that I did, and the road construction that must have sprung up in the time since my last trip home. The interstate highway system is a heck of a thing. Being able to zip along at 65, 70, or in some remote places like West Texas even faster than that, makes cross-country automobile travel take a fraction of the hours it would otherwise. I can't tell you the number of times my folks have reminisced about the days before the interstate, when going to see friends outside of DC would take almost twice as long as it does now. What's truly remarkable to me, though, is that even though the entire system of highways was built start to finish in a mere 35 years, it sure seems like when parts of it go under construction, they stay that way forever. Traffic was uncharacteristically heavy, but moving, and I was making decent time until I saw the first orange warning signs letting me know that our 4 lanes were reducing to 3, and then 2, and then 1. Hundreds of cones stretched down the road as far as the eye could see, and see I certainly could as the cars in front of me reached a complete and total standstill. It was one of the worst deadlocks I've ever been in. Seriously, I think I moved a mile in an hour. After about 3 hours, my stomach started grumbling. With an exit just ahead and no end to the traffic jam in sight, I got off and found a diner to grab some dinner. Even if traffic miraculously picked up, I still had a solid 5 hours of driving ahead of me. So at that point, I knew for sure it was going to be pretty late that I was getting in. After finishing eating, I got back on the road. Things looked like they were picking up for a couple of miles, but then I came up to the back end of the jam and was right back to waiting. We were moving a little bit better, I think averaging about 5 miles an hour at this point. But as the sun started edging toward the horizon, I pulled out my phone and started to see if Google Maps could clue me in on any kind of workaround. It's a funny thing about human nature. Most of us don't like to sit still. Studies at airports showed people would rather walk farther to baggage claim to get their luggage, even if the total time would have been less if they'd have had a slightly longer wait at plane side. Well, the power of the internet appeared to be in my favor. Though I-80 still showed as a dark red band for another 50 miles or so, there was a southbound county road coming up in a few miles, and a northbound a couple after that, either of which looked like they'd let me bypass the worst of the traffic. Since I'd spent the better part of the day sitting on the road, my patience was about worn out, and I opted to take the southbound road even though the app told me it would ultimately take about 30 minutes longer to get to my parents' house. I just wanted to get moving again, and reasoned at this rate it might take me more than the 30-minute difference to get to the northbound route anyway. And that is a choice that will haunt me until the day I die. I made the turn off and immediately felt my mood improve. The signs alternated, limiting my speed between 35 and 40 miles an hour, but even that seemed like flying compared to the log jam I'd spent the last several hours in. The drive was interesting. The road started a little twisty, with plenty of elevation changes as it curved up and around the hills of central Pennsylvania. It took me on a general southwest diagonal, but turned and doubled back on itself enough that for the first 30 minutes or so I got regular views of the stalled traffic on I-80. Pretty soon after that though, just about the time that the sun was just dipping down beneath a couple of the hills in my rear view mirror, the road took a long curving tack and carried me down and away out of sight of the interstate. Now, something that a lot of people don't realize is how big of a state Pennsylvania is. Sure, there are plenty of bigger ones, but PA is deceptively big, and it is remote, isolated. Hell, the translation of the name means Penn's Woods. After all, the Blair Witch Project didn't have to embellish that aspect of the state. The fact that you could head into the woods and walk for dozens of miles in any direction without seeing anything like another human being. It's got a decent number of big cities. Pittsburgh and Philly both have enough of a population to support major sports teams, but away from those centers of development, the Harrisburgs and the Pottsvilles and the Scrantons and what have you, there's a whole lot of nothing and trees, and dark and lonely road. Such was the road I was traveling that night, winding through the twists and turns of the Appalachian foothills. I've moved around a lot. I mentioned traveled through most of the central states anyway. I sometimes used to wonder when I'd be driving along the patch of asphalt surrounded by only untamed wilderness, what it must have been like to construct such a road, what it had been like before man had intruded with our civilization and our machines, what had lived there. I don't wonder anymore, not since that night I went left instead of right. And if you enjoyed this video, be sure to press the thumbs up, subscribe, and remember to click that bell icon to ensure that you're notified when new content drops. Until my next video, thank you for watching and hope you enjoy the rest of your day. Take care, quiet ones.